Hey, it's Sandi Krakowski, and welcome to The Sandi Show. Hey, it's Sandi. I hope you guys are having a great start to your week. With all the different crazy things going on in our world, this one thing I do know and I hold to, not only is God in control, but he has made us powerful. And we can actually make changes not only in our life, but in the lives around us if we partner with him. Today's topic is something that I mentioned on my social media, and so many of you responded. We had thousands of people interacting not only on our posts, but also writing back to me through DMs, etc. And it's a topic that I don't think I've ever really talked a whole lot about. I get a lot of questions about it when people see me working out. I get questions when people see my transformation. People want a few tips or suggestions on where to start and how they actually can apply the things that I have done to their own life and the significance of this topic when it comes to really living a vibrant life. So I'm going to jump in as far as I can on this topic, and it's going to be the topic of inflammation in the body. Now, I'm not a doctor. I am going to talk to you about some of the things that I've learned from my doctors, as well as my own personal study during, I think I started my anti-inflammatory regimen, diet, research, what have you, back in 2010. And I'm going to share some of the things that worked for me, some of the things that didn't work for me. I will give you this heads up. I come from a predisposition because of the trauma that I've experienced in my life that set me up for acute chronic inflammation. And so what I'm going to share with you, like even one of these things might change your life if you've never had a massive, a major traumatic event or traumatic injury. But if you've had a traumatic injury, this will help. If you've had a traumatic event, and the two can be different, then again, can you actually have a traumatic injury and not have trauma? I don't think so. I think the two would go hand in hand, meaning like you could have a traumatic injury where you break 4 parts of your arm, and to say that didn't affect your brain would not be true. So, but I'm going to share my experience, my journey, some of the things that I'm doing, things that worked, things that didn't work. And I hope that it brings hope to you. And more importantly, I hope it gives you courage to have a willingness to confront this topic in your own life and make some different changes to help yourself. Now, here's the thing you have to understand. Inflammation is not all bad. Inflammation is a God-given normal reaction to the immune system that when a harmful bacteria, a virus, a pathogen, or something comes into the body, we are the most incredible supercomputer on the planet, and God wired us for survival. So our response and our immune response in our cells and our tissues and our brain and our blood and our body, et cetera, our muscles including, are going to go into attack mode to protect us from dying from a bacteria, a virus, or a pathogen. And let me share with you, I've had all 3 of those. And I know what it's like, especially, a pathogen, and how devastating a pathogen can respond in your body and cause inflammation that can last for a long time. Sometimes people don't even realize it, and that's what they've been fighting their whole life. So let's jump in. This is definitely going to be an overview. This is not going to be something like you could print out and publish a book. This would take a book. Maybe one day with some doctors, I'll write that book. This is definitely going to be a part of my upcoming book that I'm working on. But for the 4 cases or pillars that I'll be talking about today, this is going to give you an overview. So it would be wise for you to take some notes, grab a pen and paper, get into a quiet place if you can, and write some notes and take these 4 pillars that I'm going to give you and some of the bullet points and start doing some research, because you deserve to have a vibrant life. You deserve to have an uninflamed body, and you deserve to be well equipped and ready in the event that you have any kind of bacteria, virus, pathogen, traumatic event, or traumatic injury happen in your life or those that you love. The first one we're going to talk about is genetics. Genetically, there's been a lot of studies that are challenging the long-held belief that I am going to be predisposed according to the genetics of my family. Now, a lot of new cutting-edge doctors are realizing that while we thought that certain diseases like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, inflammation, of which inflammation is prevalent in heart disease, inflammation is prevalent in type 2 diabetes, and inflammation is prevalent in cancer. But they've later realized that, was it really the physiological genetics, or was it the environmental genetics? Was it a case of no matter where you put that person in the world, no matter what kind of life they live, environment they're in, no matter what they eat, no matter what they experience, they are predisposed to this? Even if they're cut off from their entire bloodline, they will be predisposed to this. And many doctors, especially those who specialize in genomics and the field of genomics and biodynamics in the body and neurobiology and so many different fields, have realized there's a stronger case for the environment you were in, which is why children can be adopted, go into have all predisposed genetics physiologically and biology, and go into an environment and replicate the environment and the people they're around. They can be predisposed to not have inflammation, not be predisposed to diabetes, not be predisposed to high blood pressure, not be predisposed to high cortisol levels, not be predisposed to cancer. And if you put them in an environment with a family and a group of people who are predisposed to it because of the way that they eat, the way they handle stress, the way that they believe, the way that they interact with each other, what they are exposed to environmentally, how their cortisol levels are, what their sleep habits are. If you put them in that environment, they will all of a sudden take up the predisposition of the environment and the people they're around. That, like many of you could walk away right now and that'll change your life. That'll change your life. So you're predisposing of genetics. Yes, you need to be aware of your familial history. But if you're going to work with a doctor who's worth 2 bits their salt, legit, like they're not going to be the kind of doctor you want to later fire because they become a greater inflammatory instigator in your life than even the disease or whatever you're fighting. You want someone who understands this. You can take someone who grew up in an environment of obesity. Everybody in their family is over 100 pounds overweight. Everyone in their family has an addictive personality. Everyone in their family has inflammatory responses, all kinds of autoimmune conditions, dying young of various diseases and situations. And you can take them and relocate them to a completely different state, a completely different country with different people who aren't predisposed to all of those things and get a different result. It's fascinating. Now, obviously, it's not 100%. It's not that you're not going to be affected by your DNA. But I think the wiring of our brain that is in our genetics and how trauma is passed through the DNA, even at the time of birth and in utero, I think that we need to seriously consider what we are doing that is affecting our DNA. This is why I'm a strong proponent, and I work with one of the top foremost leaders in peptide therapy, Dr. Erica Schwartz in Manhattan. She wrote the book, Don't Let Your Doctor Kill You. She has many other best-selling books. She speaks all over the world and speaks regularly on the usage of peptide therapy, not only for anti-aging, but also for healing the immune response, helping the body to lower inflammation and helping people to live incredible lives. And she's worked with me since 2017. She also works in the whole aspect of not only rewiring and healing the genetics with peptide therapy, giving the genetics the best predisposition for better recovery. Like, for example, you can't take peptide therapy and never sleep and expect to have great results. You can't take peptide therapy and eat like crap and expect you're going to get results. You can't do peptide therapy and never work out and, work on your own trauma and different things and expect to get a result. You might get a result, but you'll never get the kind of result that you could have. And so peptide therapy, I currently, since 2007, have taken injected peptides. I give myself anywhere from 2 to 4 injections every single night. Yes, I do. I do take the weekends off to help my body flush that. Peptides, the level that I take, cannot be purchased over the internet without a doctor. There are many people who are selling way lower doses and advertising that they're just as effective, and they're not. So, for example, if you ever get any peptide therapy online and it's not shipped to you in a climate controlled container, it's useless. Okay. Unless, of course, it hasn't been activated with a liquid yet in its powder form. But even then, peptides are very sensitive. I recently ordered the peptide BPC 157, body protective compound, BPC 157. I use orally, which assists the healing of my gut with Crohn's and colitis. And again, I'm not making medical claims, but you can study, how do you heal the gut? Help the body to repair itself, help the body to get rid of the inflammation in the gut, help the body to get rid of virus and bacteria and pathogens in the gut, help the lining of the gut to heal with collagen stimulation. And BPC 157 helps very much with that recovery. And I take it orally. I also take it injected, which helps with some of the inflammation in particular joints. You can also take it nasally. I use it inhalation through my nose for sinuses, allergies, different things like that. Now, I recently ordered some BPC 157 online that was for nasal use, and it didn't arrive in a temperature controlled package. And it had already been activated once it got put into the intranasal usage. Absolutely useless. If somebody's going to mix up for you from a compounding pharmacy, BPC 157 for intranasal use, it needs to be shipped in a climate controlled environment, and the dose that you need needs to be prescribed by a doctor. Dr. Erica Swartz, by the way, is not a naturopath. She's not a clinician. She is an MD and used to run one of the largest emergency rooms in New York. Other peptide therapies that I've used and do use regularly are CJC and IPA. Now, don't be confused with the dosages that I'm using as dosages that world athletes use. I am micro dosing, very tiny, tiny, tiny dosages that help my body to recover. It helps not only with anti-aging, but the same result of anti-aging is affecting me internally, so that the lining of my gut, my joints, my cartilage, my tendon, my cellular health is thriving. Another one that I use is HGH. I don't recommend human growth hormone unless you're older, I also know that it's illegal for you to use a human growth hormone without a doctor's prescription. So I do not recommend you buy it black market in the gym or anything like that. And again, I'm using very micro doses. It was funny. Dr. Erica and I were laughing the other day, and I said to her, okay, if I tell these people on this podcast that I've been using CJC and IPA and HGH for several years, they're going to go, oh, that's why you leg press 585 at 57 years old and 162 pounds. So that's why you still have abs. No, the dosages that I use might give me a 10% at best advantage in the gym. What it's giving me an amazing advantage of is recovery of my cells, because previously, especially when I was on high opiates, and if you're on opiates, make sure you go back to an episode that I did on cannabis and Christians. And I talked about how I got off of opiates and anti-inflammatory drugs like prednisone. But what happens is I would go work out, and, with osteoarthritis and RA and Crohn's, my inflammatory markers already feel like any kind of resistance training is a threat. Any kind of walk where my heart rate goes up is a threat. Any kind of excessive sweating or anything is a threat. So it wouldn't help. My immune response would trigger against any level of exercise. And guess what I would do? Inflame. But with micro dosing, teeny tiny doses of HGH and CJC and IPA, I help that immune response when I'm working out, along with the other things I'm going to talk to you about, and keep the inflammation down. Thymosin beta and thymosin alpha are also very effective. And I highly recommend you do some research online from people like Ben Greenfield, Lifehacker, etc., on the usages of these. And again, my warning to you is do not use them unless a doctor with a reputable history and reputation, not just one of these crackerjack hormone facilities popping up on every corner these days, but a reputable clinician and doctor is supposed to be testing your labs regularly if you use these, and will give you the lowest dose possible for the greatest effect. So those are some of the things that you can use for your genetics. Another thing that I've used is stem cells and PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma. They took some stem cells out of the adipose fat of my inner thigh. They froze the stem cells. They're now still in a bank. And they injected those back into my shoulders and my knees, and then systemically, along with platelet-rich plasma. And I had a profound effect, and I had that done in 2018, and I'm getting ready to have that done again because it is so profound. I'm going to need it on my hips and my knees, and so I'm very excited about that. Stem cells, if you're still, especially if you're a Christian and you're like, no, I can't use stem cells because they only take stem cells from aborted babies. The process of stem cell usage and production is so astronomically advanced. Do they still use aborted babies? Yes, but I've not used that kind of stem cell. You can get stem cells from moms who have their baby, they don't abort the baby, and then donate amniotic tissue and donate cord blood and stuff like that. I've already told my children, if we have another grandchild, I get first dibs on the cord blood. But so you have to look outside of sometimes, and again, it's a rightful conviction. I wouldn't want to be using stem cells personally from aborted babies, but there are so many other stem cells that you actually can use. And I highly recommend you do your research before you form a conviction. The last one that I'll talk about is something that I'm still on. I have attempted to wean off of it and haven't had success yet, which is fine. Giving my body grace, giving my mind grace and my healing journey and embracing it. I am on Remicade infusions. These are biologics that have historically been used with autoimmune response and excessive chronic inflammation. Now, the other methods that I gave you have very little to no side effects documented. The biologics can be very dangerous. So my usage of these peptides also protects me in using biologics, protects my body, helps me heal, along with different lipotropics and change in lifestyle and regular consistent labs drawn. I'm able to check on my liver and my spleen and be most effective with the minimal dose of biologics that I take. So that's what I have to share with you on genetics. That is a topic that I could do a 2-day TED Talk on, but we will stop right there. I'm sure I gave you plenty to research. The next thing is diet. And we have to go here, my friends. If you think that you can lower your inflammation in your body and help your body to operate like Wolverine in its recovery and help your body to be strong and powerful, you have to talk about diet. The number one thing that we need to address is the fact of avoiding sugar. Sugar is a poison. We all know that. I don't even know if there's anybody who would argue with that. However, there are many things that cause an addiction to sugar. There can be dopamine level issues with trauma, with autoimmune conditions, with inflammation, with certain prescription medications that cause you to crave sugar excessively. And those are things that we have to examine. We cannot ignore that. The other thing is it's not like you have to go completely sugarless unless you have a massive overgrowth of candida, which I would highly recommend you work with a trained specialist to help you with different biohacking methods, like some of the ones I've mentioned, as well as others to help heal from that. But sugar, like I eat sugar like once a week as a treat. It is not a mainstay in my diet. It never will be a mainstay in my diet. And even if I'm going to drink any kind of alcohol or wine, I choose very low sugar, raw, fermented, not, what is that they do to tequila? Aged and different things like that. I have to use a clear Blanco tequila. There are particular ones that affect me differently. For me, I can use Don Julio and I'm fine. If I use another one that's Blanco, I might feel like crap the next day or for the next week. Have to be careful. I limit my tequila very much, but I do live in Arizona and they tend to put it in the water. So dry farm wines, you've heard me talk about a lot, are raw wines that are very low sugar. And I recommend that. Not only in avoiding sugar, but number two, we have to find out what inflames us. Some of you are eating a healthy diet, but you're still eating things that inflame you. There may be particular foods that you are predispositioned in the current state of inflammation you're in that is not going to be healthy for you, even though it is a generally healthy food, because it's inflaming you. And I highly recommend you work with a doctor who can run some tests and inflammatory marker tests on you to find what foods are actually inflaming you. Obviously, we have to talk about alcohol. I think I pretty much did. Alcohols that are aged, alcohols that have higher sugar, alcohols that have the higher alcohol level are going to inflame the body. A lack of vitamin D and sunshine, contrary to what you may have heard from many medical professionals, 15 minutes to a half hour of sunshine several days a week is not only sufficient for helping and raising the vitamin D level in most people, but in chronically inflamed people, it is just a start. Another thing that's super, super helpful is vitamin D supplementation and checking your labs with vitamin D, because it is my conviction that you cannot lower the inflammation response without raising the vitamin D response. One of the reasons that I came to Arizona is because of the benefit of sunshine, but also the benefit on inflammation of dry heat. Very, very helpful. Along with vitamin D therapy is red light therapy. Now, this is not necessarily underneath diet, but red light therapy would be one of those things that you can get access to that is super, super helpful in helping the body to naturally get rid of inflammation. A lot of people as well don't realize that a perpetually dehydrated state will cause your body to swell to prevent you from dying of dehydration. I have to drink over a gallon a day. In the summer, it's 2 gallons a day living here in Arizona. And because of that, I have to supplement my sodium, potassium, and calcium levels as well, because the more water you take in, the more you activate your diuretic hormones. So make sure you're paying attention to whether or not you are dehydrated when you're trying to get rid of inflammation. The next thing we're going to talk about, we've talked about genetics, we've talked about diet, we're going to talk about disease. Autoimmune conditions cause inflammation, whether it's in the skin, certain organs, in the brain, doesn't matter. Autoimmune conditions are a immunal response that self-attacks the body. Auto meaning self-attacking immune response causes horrific inflammation. And the first observation, if you will, of inflammation in my body showed up by the time I was 11. Actually, I think it showed up when I was about 7 or 8, when I had acute infections starting and severe malabsorption and vitamin deficiencies. I wouldn't find out till later in my adult life that the incredible, devastating, life-threatening trauma events that I have lived through, multiple events, which caused me to have complex PTSD most of my life, predisposed me for an autoimmune response, because that is the body's response of trying to keep me alive. So getting those autoimmune conditions under control with some of the things that I've mentioned, or maybe other ways that your doctor is going to advise you, will help to lower the immune response. The inflammation. Connective tissue disease, of which I have had with some of my autoimmune conditions, has caused an inflammatory war in my body. And certain workouts can cause me to be swole, which is a natural response of inflammation that then goes down and causes the muscles to grow, but it wouldn't go down. I've had times when I've had to pull back on my workouts as I was healing and recovering because of autoimmune response and connective tissue issues, because my body would respond to the workout like I had just been threatened. My heart rate variability would show up in my sleeping app, that it was all over the place and I was restless and I'm not recovering and my sleep is sucking and my connective tissue disease is at an all-time high. So I have to pay attention to that. Certain things that help with connective tissue that's helped me is the practice of gauchois. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Some people call it scraping. You've heard of cupping and scraping that help people. Because of my predisposition and my autoimmune conditions that I'm battling, I have to be very careful with scraping so that it's not too much. I have to be really careful with deep tissue massage, even though I get one every week, so that it's not too much. Otherwise, what'll happen? My connective tissue will think it's a threat and I'll swell and my inflammation will go up. Infection. We already know that inflammation is a normal reaction of the immune response to harmful bacteria, virus, and pathogens. So infections are going to cause inflammation. Many people who have chronic inflammation have only had basic baseline tests from a doctor who doesn't know very much, or actually won't do very much because they're not going to make much money on it. And you need to go outside of that. Fire your current doctors if they're not giving you the kind of service that you need, and get a better one. Do some research. You might find, as I did, that you have a pathogenic infection that you don't understand. It's not enough to kill you, but it's enough to make you feel like crap every single day. It's enough to make you inflame so much that your colon's bleeding, your liver's inflamed, your spleen's inflamed. Yeah. Check infection. Certain cancers can cause massive inflammation. Being overweight definitely causes inflammation. And even if you lose all the weight, it's going to take a while for the internal organs to let go of the inflammation. So you have to pay attention to that. Burns obviously cause inflammation. It is the body's way of sending help so that the burns don't kill you with infection and inflammation, and helping the body to heal. Pathogens and viruses, we've already talked about. Hormone imbalances can not only be caused by inflammation, but actually can cause inflammation. I take HGH not only because I'm 57 years old, had a hysterectomy in 1995, many years ago, after losing several babies, and then they almost lost me. But I take HGH and the other peptides that I told you because they help balance my hormones. And again, in very micro doses. And the last thing that I'm excited because of the over 1,000 hours of research that I have done in the last several years, and the application of this in my own life, and doctors who are now stating this is a primary reason for out of control inflammation in the body, and that is trauma. Traumatic injury can produce excessive pro-inflammatory mediators and activate your immune cells to target specific organs and cause systemic inflammation. So, for example, you can get in a car accident, you can break your leg and your arm and your ribs, and before you know it, your whole body's inflamed because your body felt the threat, your brain and everything is responding to the trauma. Now, you may even be having PTSD from the accident, and you've got very high levels of inflammation. Doctors are also seeing that PTSD can disrupt sleep, obviously. Many people who have PTSD have never been able to sleep through the night uninterrupted. Hormones can be out of whack because of PTSD, anxiety and depression, obvious symptoms and problems that happens with post-traumatic stress disorder and chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, and inflammation. PTSD can cause inflammation. PTSD can cause inflammation. You've got war vets who have chronic, complex PTSD who are now dying early of inflammatory issues. Excessive cortisol caused by trauma response and PTSD also creates inflammation. PTSD seems to, doctors and studies have shown, interfere with the normal feedback loop regulating cortisol. So recovering and managing PTSD, the three modalities that I am most fond of, EMDR plus parts work. I don't recommend EMDR without parts work because it's not going to be as effective. It has been the single most profound thing that has helped me. But as my therapist has made me promise to emphasize, EMDR plus parts work will not do a thing for you if you do not have a willingness to walk through the memories, to confront the beliefs, to do the deep work, and to see the results. Same thing for microdosing psychedelics. This is a very new study, very helpful. While cannabis can help manage some symptoms of PTSD, microdosing psychedelics has been medically documented to help the brain rewire neural pathways, release some of the trauma from the brain and the inflammation occurring there, which helps the rest of the body. I highly recommend you do some research on it. It's not something that Duke or Mayo Clinic universities are strangers to. They used to do microdosing of psychedelics many, many, many years ago. I highly recommend you do some research on it. And last but not least, ketamine infusions as well as oral ketamine used with a licensed psychiatrist, psychologist, or psychotherapist also has shown many benefits. But again, without a willingness to work through the memories, to be accountable to someone like a therapist that you can trust, to confront the belief system, and to want to heal, these modalities can't even get you where you need to get. That's why some people can go to therapy forever and still be a narcissist. That's why some people can go to therapy forever and never change. Some of you were brutally traumatized by people who went to therapy most of their life and ended up making you their victim as a predator. And on behalf of, any therapist or leader who's ever talked about therapy, I am so sorry that happened to you. That also happened to me. One of my primary predators is a very young girl, spent the majority of my life in and out of therapy. I've watched this person go in and out of therapy, even electroconvulsive therapy and all different kinds of prescription therapy and all different kinds of talk therapy, et cetera. Yet they were still very much a psychopath and were my primary predator when I was younger. So therapy without a willingness to heal, without a willingness to confront belief systems, without a willingness to change, no matter what, are going to be pretty much useless, in my opinion. And the last thing I want to talk about is the fact of understanding why inflammation is super important in preventing or helping preventing COVID and also preventing side effects that come from COVID, because COVID is primarily a massive inflammatory response from the COVID-19 virus. I don't have the clinical name of it, but we all know what we're talking about all over the world. And it's super important for you to keep your body in an uninflamed state. It is super important for you to understand how to lower inflammation, to help yourself to remedy some of the side effects. Many people have even had inflammatory responses to the vaccine and have made a decision that the inflammatory response to the disease would be far greater than the inflammatory response to the vaccine. But again, it's super important to protect yourself and know how to lower those inflammation responses. And again, I'm not a doctor. I don't recommend you do anything that I've said without consulting with a great physician and or therapist who have your best interest in heart. I highly recommend you not search for one like you do for a car, but you search for a therapist and a doctor, being willing to fire every person who comes along that doesn't serve you well, but be willing to search for one that will be the answer to what you need, because you deserve it. So my friend, this concludes this podcast about inflammation. I hope that it encouraged you. I hope that it challenged you. And more importantly, I hope that it provoked a willingness in you to confront what's going on in your own body and your own life and step into healing, because you deserve it. I look forward to talking to you soon. Please come on my Facebook, my Instagram. Let me know what you think of this episode. I want to know what's going on in your life. I want to see your faces, hear about the things that are challenging you and how I can best serve you. I love you. I mean it. And we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.